Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here, and today we have another recent reads video for you. Unfortunately, by the fact that I don't have any physical copies of these books anymore, you can tell that this is going to be a pretty rubbish ratings of books. None of these was more than a 3-star, and I hated one of them. It was possibly one of my least favourite books of all time, so yeah, it's not great. So this is going to be a very much a negative video, but that's okay, we have them sometimes. So the very first one was probably my favourite book of these four, and that is The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest by Stieg Larsson, which I gave a 3-star to. This is the third and final book in Stieg Larsson's trilogy. However, I believe David Lagercrantz has then gone on to write another trilogy that follows this one because Stieg Larsson passed away. And I do want to continue and read those, well, at least read the first one and see how I find it, and then whether or not I want to continue the series. But I have to say this was not a strong ending to this series for me. This was very much a 3-star read, and to be honest, it nearly was a 2-star. The whole series in general follows Michael Blomkvist, who is a journalist. In the first book, he gets hired by a gentleman to find out what happened to this gentleman's granddaughter, because she went missing years ago, and that he keeps getting sent these pressed flowers in the post every birthday, and he thinks it is the person who murdered his granddaughter who is sending him these flowers, taunting him basically. That's the first one, and in the first one Mikhail teams up with Lisbeth Salander, who is a socially awkward genius. She's a wonderful character. I absolutely love her. She's not a very people person at all, but she's very, very intelligent. She's a hacker. She has a really interesting amount of skills. She does lots of different things, and she has lots of things that going on in her own life as well, and it basically follows that. The second one then continues on from that, and again the third one continues on again. Now I will say, obviously I can't really say too much about the third one because I don't want to spoil it for you, but the third one for me was way too long. It is about 800 pages or something. I ended up listening to it on audiobook, which I did prefer, because reading and listening at the same time was definitely the way to go for me, because I don't think I would have finished it otherwise. But honestly, it just kept, there was a whole section of this book that was about a not ancient, but a kind of government plot, and it was very political and very kind of intense and very strange, but it was nothing to do with what I liked about the first book. The first book, I loved the mystery and the kind of the element of that side of things, and I just didn't like the fact that that wasn't really carried across into the other two. So unfortunately this was a 3-star for me, and yeah, it wasn't very successful. I do still love the fact that Lisbeth was in this one, and I loved reading about her, but there was good chunks of this book where she wasn't in it, and yeah, it just wasn't really for me. So unfortunately this was a 3-star, but I am glad that I finally finished the series. I'm intrigued to continue on and read David Lagercrantz, his continuation, but I'm not super excited, well, I'm not really holding out hope is what I should say. The next one that we have was The Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl by Jeannie Velasco. I always say Velasco. And I really wanted to like this one. This was a book that I was sent by the publisher, so again this was, I was really glad to be able to read this one. And this is a non-fiction book about Jeannie Velasco, who when she was younger, she was raped by her best friend, and this book is about her confronting him years later. They've not spoken pretty much since it happened, and she wants to speak to him about what happened, and she basically interviews him. And this is the book about that. Now, I liked the concept of this, and I thought that it would be really interesting to hear her go back and kind of confront that, and then to kind of see how that affected her, because in her eyes he was not a bad person, and she was trying to confront the fact that sometimes not bad people do bad things. But the thing I didn't like about this, so the way that this book is set out is there are chapters at the beginning about her talking about the history, and then what they do is there's a transcript of the conversation that she has with him. Now, she has a conversation on the phone at one point, and then she also speaks to him in person, and so she has transcribed the conversation that they have, and then she reads back this transcript, and then she basically talks about almost every line of what's been said, and then analyzes it as to why he said that, why she said it, what her reaction to him, because basically the conversation they have initially, she is very kind of like, she'll kind of look back at it and be like, oh, I was a bit dismissive there, or maybe I should have pressed him harder on this part, or this is because I was feeling like this, or this is because I've been socially conditioned to be like this. And while that was kind of could have been interesting, it just felt very much like there was a conversation and it was like picking apart. It was almost like language, it was being picked apart, and I felt like it was just perhaps slightly too much. Like it just felt a bit kind of like overdone, and yeah, I kind of wanted to hear more about what she was thinking rather than her, because she'd kind of have a lead up of like, this is what I'm going to say to him, this is what we're going to talk about. Then they'd talk about it, and then she'd then analyse what had just happened, so it was very repetitive in that way, and so I didn't enjoy the reading experience. Obviously you're never going to enjoy it, it's not like an enjoyable subject, but I didn't enjoy kind of, I didn't really get too much from it because I felt like it was just very repetitive. So unfortunately I gave this one a 2-star. The next one we have is a book that I ended up DNFing, and I hated this book, and I only read 10 pages of it, but this is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and unfortunately for me, I thought I would pick this one up because it's sort of seen as a classic, and I'd heard that the only things I knew about this was that it was about a paedophile who fell in love with a 12-year-old girl, and it addressed that and talked about kind of why that wasn't a good thing to do, and you know, it looked at that in a kind of more in-depth way. And while that might have been true later on in the book, the first 10 pages were actually disgusting. Like, I read this and felt physically sick. The first 10 pages, it was talking from this guy, this old man's perspective, looking at 12-year-olds, talking about how he is kind of, his sexual preference was for like 5 to 17, or 5 to 7, his sexual preference was like 7 to 12-year-olds, and the reasons why that was a good thing, and why that made him a good person, and why he could understand that, and why this, you know, and how he was superior because of this. And I was like, it just felt gross, and this may be a classic, and this may talk a lot about a lot of interesting things, but I couldn't get past that part, and I just felt like, no. To me, the fact that somebody's even tried to write that, like, that tells me a lot about that person, and yeah, I can't, I'm sorry, it just wasn't for me at all. It was definitely a DNF, and I will not be reading it in the future either. The last book that I wanted to talk about in this particular video is The Naughtiest Girl Again by Enid Blyton. This is the sequel to The Naughtiest Girl. It's part of the Naughtiest Girl series. I have the whole series on my bookshelves, and I'm currently reading through them all, and then obviously will talk about those other ones in the future as I read them. The second one is probably not my favourite. Basically, if you don't know, the Naughtiest Girl series follows Elizabeth, who is a young girl, and she goes to a boarding school because she is too naughty, and her governesses keep basically leaving, and so her mum decides that she's going to go to this boarding school. And in the first book, the reason why she's called the Naughtiest Girl is because she says that she's going to be the naughtiest girl they've ever seen, so that they basically expel her so that she doesn't have to go to school there again. However, once she gets there, she soon realises that if she starts to you know, behave a bit, she might actually enjoy herself. And then the sequel is her kind of continuing on that journey. And while I enjoyed reading about this, it's not very well written in that way. Like, it's very much written for kids, I think, and so although the first one I found there was lots of like fun morals and lots of different like tales and things that you could take away from it, the second one didn't really have that as much, and I didn't really like the friendships in it very much either, which is generally one of the things that I really enjoy about this series in general. I do know that I like some of the later books better because I have read them in the past, but the second one is not my favourite, so unfortunately this one was a 3-star as well. But there you are, guys, that is the 4 books that I have recently read. Again, they weren't great, like I didn't have a good track record this time, but hopefully next times will be much more successful. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these and also what you have recently been reading, and give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and click the little bell icon if you want to be notified when I upload, and I will see you next time for another video. Bye guys!